housekeeping notes before we get into the webinar. First off, please use the chat function. It's accessible in the control panel at the bottom of your screen, and you can let us know where you're tuning in from. If you require translation, there will be one presenter today who's speaking in French. The rest will be in English, but we do have live French to English and English to French translation available. You can access that also from the bottom of your screen. There's a function with a little globe that you can use for enabling the live translation. The translation feature isn't supported if you're using your phone for audio, though. You won't see that feature available. We also have closed caption services available for those who may require them. The service is only available in English at this time, though. You can also access that from the control panel at the bottom of the screen using the live transcript icon. We're recording today's webinar. It's appearing live on Facebook, and we also make a recording and post it to our website at climateactionnetwork.ca/pathways to zero. So you can access this one and any others in the series there as well. So for those who are new to the series, I'm going to start with a quick recap of the project so far. The webinar series began in late January, and this is the fourth of 10 sessions that we're using to bring stories of climate justice solutions from all corners of civil society. The webinar series builds on work that Climate Action Network Canada has done for years to bring together civil society to create pathways to a just and safe future for everyone. In the past year, the COVID-19 pandemic has really driven home the need for collaboration across sectors, mostly to address cracks in the social and economic systems. And that spirit of cross-cutting collaboration is what fuels this webinar series as well. As we've said many times before, there are similar structural deficiencies at the root of both the climate crisis and COVID. And whether we're talking about racism, sexism, or xenophobia, or income inequality, or the precariousness of jobs, housing, healthcare, and education, all of these issues are the same pinch points that affect both COVID and climate change. This series is intended to generate smart, thoughtful discussion about how we create just and equitable pathways toward decarbonization. We want to leave you with an informed and energized feeling of hope, inspired by the commitment of passionate, brilliant, generous people from all walks of life. For the full schedule, you can visit our website at climateactionnetwork.ca/pathways to zero, and you'll find details on each week's seminar, including the speakers and registration links. We'll be uploading the recordings to the website there, so if you miss a week or you know someone who might want to check out a conversation, you can always find the videos there. Lauren will share the link to the website in the chat too. Again, let me remind you that you can access French and English translation using the control panel at the bottom of your screen. And thanks so much to Alex today for providing that service. Okay, and so now, yeah, I'm just seeing lots of chatter from my team in the corner, out of the corner of my eye, that the translator is having a little bit of difficulty with the audio today. So bear with us. Hopefully the translation is working adequately well. We'll try to speak slowly and make things work here, but hopefully it's working all right. So let's turn to today's webinar. According to a 2011 Stats Canada study, 3 out of every 4 Canadians identify as a member of a faith community. Communities of faith encompass an enormous number and diversity of people. And within the climate movement, faith spaces have been vital for interrogating and catalyzing humans' moral responsibility and accountability. In this webinar, we're digging into some powerful and deeply inspiring climate justice campaigns that are being led by our faith community members. Throughout our discussion, please post any questions that you may have using the webinar's Q&A function or in the chat. And as time allows, we'll draw on audience questions toward the end. So I'm going to start by introducing our 5 panelists for today. Carrie Munven is the Senior Political Analyst at Citizens for Public Justice and a frequent contributor to the Climate Action Network discussions. I'm sure she's familiar to many of you. Beth Lorimer is the Ecological Justice Program Coordinator at Kairos. Beth is a social and ecological justice advocate with over 10 years of experience in sustainable development. She's worked with academia, civil society, and government, including global affairs and the status of women Canada. Her work is focused primarily on freshwater management, climate justice, gender, and urban issues in Canada and sub-Saharan Africa. Reverend Michelle Singh is an interfaith minister and the executive director at Faith in the Common Good. For more than 10 years, she's been actively engaged in Canada's interfaith movement, including vice-chairing the award-winning World Interfaith Harmony Week Steering Committee and co-founding a multi-faith spiritual dialogue circle that's been meeting monthly for 12 years. Michelle was a board member and a steering committee co-chair for the 2018 Parliament of World's Religions, overseeing the world's largest interfaith gathering featuring over 1,000 diverse spiritual programs attended by over 8,500 people. Ariane Collin is the coordinator of the project Future of Social Christianity at Centre Justice et Foi, the Center for Justice and Faith in Montreal. This project aims to support and nurture the network of Christian activists in Quebec. She trained in architecture, permaculture, and integrated development of rural communities. And in the last 15 years, she's worked in community groups and cooperative housing while being active in various environmental and international solidarity movements. And finally, Ben Greeter is the energy coordinator for energy efficiency at the Ecology Action Centre in Halifax. Ben is passionate about community energy planning, electric vehicle transportation, active transportation, and anything related to energy efficiency. Ben graduated from Acadia University with a professional studies degree in community development and environmental sustainability studies. In recent years, he's worked as a community energy planner, and his goal is to help people understand the benefits of energy efficiency, energy conservation, and renewable energy. Most people have heard of accountants. Well, Ben is a slightly different kind of accountant where he focuses more on greenhouse gas emission accounting. He's also an energy efficiency specialist with a background in building sciences and energy analysis. And so that you understand his connection to this webinar today, the Ecology Action Centre is also the Atlantic hub for Faithful Footprints, which we'll be talking about today. So welcome all. Let me set the stage for this week's discussion. Many of you, most of you are members of Climate Action Network. We're deeply privileged to count among our members several faith-based organizations, including yours. These groups have unique abilities to reach out to huge numbers of people at the community level in cities, towns, and villages all over the country. You get to engage deeply in philosophical and moral discussions that touch on our individual and collective responsibilities to act on climate change. As a result, faith organizations and those with whom you all work and serve have the power to organize and mobilize for climate action like few others. So today we're going to hear some of the ways that you all engage your communities. And I'd like to start with Beth and Carrie. I'd like to hear from you about the For the Love of Creation initiative that you launched last year. This brings dozens of churches and faith-based organizations together on climate action. If you could, share with us some of what you're planning to do for the 2021 Faith in Action campaign, and tell us about how this is anchored in your two organizations, and what many of us in the Climate Action Network family can expect this year.
All right, it looks like we just lost Beth, so I might kick it off until she comes back. My name is Carrie. I'm at Citizens for Public Justice, and I'm participating today from unceded Algonquin territory in rural West Quebec. For the Love of Creation is a national initiative that brings together faith bodies and faith-based organizations in Canada to mobilize education, reflection, action, and advocacy for climate justice. Kairos Canada and Citizens for Public Justice are both endorsing organizations of this initiative, and we sit on the coordinating committee. We were going to introduce Kairos next, but I'm going to let Beth do that because I feel like she's a little bit better suited. So I will say, though, that Citizens for Public Justice is a national progressive organization of members inspired by faith to act for ecological and social justice in Canadian public policy. We understand public justice as the political dimension of loving your neighbor, working for the common good, and caring for creation. We were founded in 1963, but don't worry, that's as much of the history as I think I'm going to dive into. We grew out of the Christian Reform tradition, but are now very much ecumenical in nature, with staff and board members from a range of Christian traditions. And we're really fortunate that we occasionally get interns and volunteers, though not yet anybody in staff positions, from other faith traditions as well. Our work focuses on three key policy areas. The first is ending poverty in Canada. Some of you may be familiar with Dignity for All, the campaign for Poverty-Free Canada, and that's a campaign that we co-founded and co-lead with Canada Without Poverty and with Campaign 2000. Our second major issue area is achieving climate justice, and the third is respect for refugee rights. Over the last few years, some really important elements that link to all three of our areas are increasing our intersectional analysis and looking at the place of gender, ethnicity, and other elements that influence position and power in Canadian society. And we're also increasingly working to live into our commitment to reconciliation and honoring Indigenous rights. So that's a little bit about who CPJ is in a nutshell. Maybe one other thing I'll say about us is that we work in doing research and analysis, though often in a role where we sort of interpret or share the primary research of others, particularly in our climate justice work. We work in public education and animation, spending time in church basements or on Zoom, as the case may be, with faith communities across the country, and also in political engagement. When we're in the office, we've been located in Ottawa since 2007, just a few blocks from Parliament Hill, and that's been a really important part of our work. I'm going to flip things around because I'm going to trust that Beth is going to be back in a second. So she's going to talk a little bit about how some of the history of faith communities and climate justice and how we've come together. But what I'm going to jump to is actually talking a little bit about our Faith in Action campaign, which I'm not sure, Lauren and Tika, if you knew this when you were setting the schedule, but it launched yesterday. So the timing of this webinar for us is really fantastic. So yesterday was Ash Wednesday in the Christian calendar, so the beginning of the season of Lent. And what we're doing actually is inviting people to reduce their personal and household greenhouse gas emissions, to make a public pledge related to that, and also to demonstrate support for more far-reaching Canadian climate action by writing to key cabinet ministers on a range of climate justice issues. I'm just going to share my screen here. And one moment. So our new Faith in Action campaign is modeled on what was Citizens for Public Justice Give It Up for the Earth campaign, which ran during Lent every year from 2017 to 2020. And this is something that some Climate Action Network members may have been aware of from the last few years. What's really exciting this year is actually the campaign has been picked up by the broader faith collaboration for the love of creation, which includes 35 organizations from across the country. So national churches, faith-based organizations, religious orders, and others to come together behind this campaign. And another big difference is that rather than just running for the period of Lent, we've actually decided to extend it right through to the beginning of October, which is the end of what many Christian traditions celebrate as the season of creation. And that will be important to give us a little bit of time for some political engagement and some wrap-up activities in that month leading up to COP26. So what are we going to do with this? An important piece of this campaign is that it speaks into the desire of concerned individuals and communities to do something, while at the same time acknowledging that the scale of change required necessitates far-reaching government action. So, and this is important for a couple of reasons. First, uncertainty about what to do can lead to despair, isolation, silence, and inaction, which far too often is understood by political leaders as approval of the status quo. The other thing that it does is it signals that we are working as individuals, as families, as communities to do our part to bend the curve on greenhouse gas emissions and allows us to press government with greater integrity. One of the other things, and I'd be curious to hear what other panelists today think about this, but one of the other things that's been really interesting is that despite the fact that as faith-based organizations, we have a long history of engagement in environmental action and climate justice, politicians and political leaders often still view us as the unusual suspects. They don't expect church folks and other people of faith to be the ones that are coming and asking for more action to address climate change. And there's just enough of an element of surprise in that I think sometimes it helps us to get a little bit more attention and perhaps to be heard a little bit more fully. So the first.
Alors,
I think we're okay there. Yeah, I think we're okay. Is the translation still working? Sorry, Carrie.
No problem.
We're working on it. Give us a second.
Okay, all right. Sorry about that interruption. Keep going, Carrie.
Okay. So the first piece that we are asking people to do is to pledge to take personal action. And again, we know that personal action alone is not going to solve the crisis that we have before us, but it's something that we find often gives people a sense of empowerment and a feeling that they're doing something tangible to make a contribution. It's also, and this won't be news to many folks around this table, it's also a really important psychological shift when we commit to taking individual actions in our homes and the way that we move around and that kind of thing. It can help us to prepare for the broader changes that we want to see and that we know are required in society. So that's the first piece that we invite people to do. And it's also important because I think it is important to recognize that that broad sectors of faith communities are on board and engaged and really interested in taking action to address climate change. But for some, they need more of an easy entry point. So this also serves that purpose. It can be the beginning of a conversation.
Ça peut être le début d'une conversation.
Okay, I'm hearing a little bit of the French. I don't know if that's supposed to be happening. But anyway, I'm going to keep going. So the first piece is the personal action, but also really important, and where I think I personally get most excited, is that we are calling on our government to take action. So this year, in past years, it's been a postcard directed around one ask to one cabinet minister, and this year we have a series of 3 actions. The first is around increasing climate ambition and investing in a just transition. Climate Action Network folks will recognize the climate ambition target that we've identified as what we need to achieve. And the second piece is around investing in a just transition to a fair, inclusive, green economy. And one of the things that we really want to highlight here is that this is based in justice. We need to address, as Tika said, the multiple crises that are intersecting. So the way that we respond to climate change also needs to take that in mind. Which actually leads me to the second call, which is around Indigenous rights. We know that in December, new legislation was introduced on the implementation of the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People, but we feel it's still really key that we keep the pressure on there and make sure that however it moves forward, that the principles and the substance of the UN Declaration is what is carried out and translates into Canadian laws and policies. So a key piece of that, of course, is that the government engaged in robust, inclusive dialogue with Indigenous stakeholders to ensure that the action plan envisioned in Bill C-15 is a core priority across departments. And of course, the third piece is related to climate finance, so supporting adaptation and mitigation efforts. And the emphasis here is really on a call to provide equal support for climate change adaptation and mitigation measures in the Global South through international climate financing mechanisms with additional funding for loss and damages. And this last piece, we tried to land on a date, but we realized that we've already missed the mark here, and that's to scale up our fair share contribution of climate finance to at least $4 billion US per year. So that's, and I feel like I did not do a good job of heeding Tika's encouragement to speak slowly and as we went through. So but that's the essence of the campaign. It really is about taking personal action, acknowledging the interconnectedness of so many of the crises that we're facing right now, and encouraging government action across a range of policy areas so that we can not only reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but also achieve climate justice. So one final note on how to participate, and then I'll pass it back to Beth. We have invited local communities, local organizers to register their participation in the campaign, in part so that we get a sense of where all people are participating. And I will say that so far we have registrants right across the country. I think we're still looking for participants in the far north, but I did see Newfoundland and Labrador come in the other day. And this is in part also to, especially in this moment where there's so much separation in terms of, through lockdowns and curfews and all of that, to help people to continue to come together in community and to recognize that just as we've come together as a broad network, even if it's getting together online, taking these actions in community makes us stronger and makes our voices louder. It's also now possible, though, to participate directly by going to the fortheloveofcreation.ca website and participating there. So we hope you'll join us for the love of creation. And now we'll go back to the beginning of our presentation. And Beth, I did give some of the overview stuff, and I have introduced Citizens for Public Justice, but I did not introduce Kairos or speak to faith communities and climate justice.
Okay, before we switch over to Beth, I just want to make sure that we're getting the translation function working here. We're having some difficulty with it. Alex, who is our translator, I'm wondering if you can check the chat panel. Our team is giving you some direction there. I think that your microphone must not be close enough to your mouth or something. There's some issue that your sound keeps fading out. So we currently have translation shut off, but we'll re-enable it right away. Beth, okay, I'm gonna hand it over to you. And I'm just watching the clock. We're running a little bit behind, but that's okay. So yeah, go ahead, Beth.
Great, and I apologize. I'm hotspotting with my phone right now to be with you because internet is down, a curse that I experience daily. So happy to be here, and I'm joining you from the territory of the Huron-Wendat, Petun, Seneca, and Mississaugas of the New Credit Indigenous Peoples, otherwise known as Toronto. And Kairos Canada, which is a network of
Canada.
Indigenous settlers, newcomers in Canada, working with people of faith and good conscience all over the world for ecological justice and human rights. We unite 10 Canadian churches and religious organizations for faithful action for justice and peace. And we're committed to a vision of ecological justice where we see humanity living within natural limits in connected relation to all living things. I think Carrie spoke a little bit to kind of an introduction of where perhaps we came to for the love of creation, that there's a long history, of ecumenical and interfaith collaboration on social and ecological justice issues, everywhere from the civil rights movement to international debt cancellation to climate justice. There is a principle that guides this kind of collaboration. It's called the Loon Principle, and it affirms that churches should act together in all matters, except those for which there are kind of deep differences of conviction. As people of faith, we're all called to love and care for creation, and climate justice is one area in which we should and can continue to work together. Within our faith communities, there is a diversity of heritage, perspectives, experiences, and this means that faith communities have a reach we can reach a diverse number of people in our communities and connect with them on the issue of climate change. And we can do that in a way that other environmental organizations and even government might be able to do. So that is a really key point, and I know Carrie touched on that a bit. I'll just speak a little bit briefly. I'm trying to cut out a bit, recognizing that we don't have much more time to present. But For the Love of Creation came together kind of in the wake of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change report, recognizing that this is a critical decade for taking action. And so far we have brought 35 organizations together. More are kind of in dialogue and conversation with us. And essentially we have pledged to collaborate more deeply, more intensely, and engage more broadly across our communities than we ever have before. And we welcome any community of faith in Canada to join us in this movement. We work in three main areas. Carrie spoke to the advocacy piece, but we also have work around theological reflection and local and congregational engagement. And I'll just make a wrapping up. Through our local engagement work, we really are hoping to increase dialogue and reduce polarization in the climate change conversation in Canada, in order to build consensus on the actions that we need to take to achieve a just transition and to see kind of a new economy come to be. And we've developed a series of guides that are designed to facilitate small group conversations on climate change. So these are the Faithful Climate Conversations, which you see now on the slide. And there are 3 guides available listed there. And these guides are really kind of built on this idea that values are core to the identity of people of faith. And they're also the attitudes on which the foundation on which attitudes to climate change are built. So this values-based language needs to be central to how we engage people on climate change. And research on climate change communication has kind of showed us that this is a needed aspect to framing. And it's kind of a necessary piece for shifting people's attitudes and behaviors. Faith communities are uniquely positioned to approach the climate change conversation from this values-based perspective. And something that we kind of go back to a lot is Catherine Hayhoe, a climate scientist, who tells us that one of the most effective things we can do to address climate change is to talk about it. So our work is kind of building on that premise. And we're trying to create a space for supportive, values-based conversations on climate change that will motivate and lead people to action. So to have these conversations and then to engage them, as Carrie explained, through our advocacy campaigns. So I'll leave it there.
Thank you so much, Beth. And I appreciate the extra effort you've gone to stay connected to us. I understand the woes of technology issues. Seems to be rampant today. Okay, I am going to move us along, and I'd like to turn now to Reverend Michelle. So in addition to your work on the steering committee for the 2018 Parliament of World Religions, where climate change was one of the priority topics, your organization, Faith in the Common Good, has also been involved in many climate-oriented projects in recent years. You've led efforts toward the greening of Canadian mosques, churches, temples, and gurdwaras, and doing energy benchmarking for these faith spaces. You're also the delivery partner for the United Church of Canada's Faithful Footprints, the only program of its kind in Canada, and we'll hear about that as well from Ben. I'm wondering if you can give us some insight into how your network works with faith communities to make an impact with these priority issues. How have you built momentum behind the projects, and what can we expect to see happen this year? Go ahead, Michelle.
Thank you, Tika. I would just like to first begin by acknowledging that Faith in the Common Goods projects from coast to coast to coast are on the traditional territories of diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. Faith in the Common Good is Canada's only national interfaith sustainability network, and we actually turned 21 this year. Our role is to support diverse faith communities to create greener, healthier, more resilient neighborhoods. We are also an endorsing member for the Love of Creation, And we are also a founding member of Green Faith International, which is calling for a global multi-faith day of climate action on March 11th called Sacred People, Sacred Earth. I'll just share with you some brief highlights about some of the programming that we've done over the years. What brings our network members together is that we all share a sacred calling to protect creation and to serve our neighbors. And the more that we can make climate destabilization a deeply moral issue, the more of an impact we can have towards encouraging society towards action. I think this is really one of the most important roles that Canadian faith communities can play. We have a series of regional Greening Sacred Spaces chapters. It's our longest running program that connects faith communities with local, nonprofit, municipal, and commercial organizations that are also dedicated to a sustainable future. It's a practical program in that it provides faith communities with both the educational and spiritual dimensions of greening in the form of creating gardens that are everything from including a labyrinth to walking gardens, meditation gardens, to food gardens that contribute to the community that they're in. We also produce a number of how-to guides that address things like audits and retrofits, and basically what's needed to reduce a faith community's footprints. We look at how we help faith communities discern how to improve their building, to lower their energy costs, and to be more environmentally friendly. One of our programs, the GTHA Faith Building Energy Benchmarking Program, was a 3-year program that was funded by the Ontario Trillium Foundation. It engaged over 100 faith groups in Ontario in tracking their electrical, gas, and GHG consumption with monthly data from their utility companies. Participants included faith groups, Judaism, Islam, Christian denominations, and the program allowed them to first measure their impact and then go about the work of reducing their carbon footprint and therefore their impact on the environment. They did everything from switching to LED lighting, replacing windows and doors, retrofilling boilers, installing motion sensors, thermostat controls, and building automation systems. Some installed solar panels. And given that buildings account for about 42% of a typical faith community's carbon footprints, and there are over 27,000 faith buildings across Canada, energy benchmarking is one tool to help faith communities take those practical and economical climate actions by lowering their energy use and emissions. We also have extreme weather resilience projects. Faith communities are embedded strongly in their communities and are often the trusted places that people go to. In Brampton, we developed a lighthouse project partnering with CREW and the City of Brampton's Emergency Management Center. In a climate emergency, faith-based organizations are able to provide a place of refuge, a cooling station, a warming station, a call center, information center, while the city contributed things such as support for the community grants, dealing with liability and WSIB issues. In Oakville, another program called Oakville Ready added an extra layer of support to the community. During the way it was originally designed was that during times of extreme weather, ice storms, flooding, wind events, and so forth, the community could access resources at a number of faith-based stakeholders that included synagogues, churches of various denomination. Kerr Street Mission as well was part of that project. What's happened since COVID is that there was a new call for action to respond to what's happening in the current pandemic. As a result of the infrastructure that was already in place, Oakville Ready is working with partners in the Halton Peel region to create a virtual community that responds to the issues that they are dealing with. Our programs are not just about buildings, though, and it's not just about greening. Faith communities have a responsibility to take action that is rooted in their spirituality and their belief system. So, for example, the Canadian arm of the Global Catholic Climate Movement is part of our network. Their focus is on working with Catholics across Canada to respond to Pope Francis's urgent call for social, political, and ecological transformation. One of our current projects is focused on the Canadian Catholic Divest, Reinvest campaign, which seeks to harmonize Catholic values with Catholic-held investments. In Canada, there are also over 900 mosques and 1 million Muslims. A recent survey we did as part of our Greening Canadian Mosque program found that over 98% of the respondents believe that mosques have an important role to play in inspiring the Muslim community to care for nature. And 100% of the respondents actually want their local mosque to be involved in environmentally friendly programs. One of our partners in York region was able to completely transform their community. The Jafari Community Center's sustainability program was able to develop an eco team, which is going on, I think, maybe 7 years old now or more. That's a fully integrated member of their board. They can now serve over, one of their programs is that they can now serve over 3,000 community members while generating less than 4 bags of garbage during Ramadan. They're also teaching other faith communities beyond mosques, but are also partnering with churches and other organizations to teach them how to do this. And finally, one of our programs that we've been working on for 5 years, Faith in the Common Good, is the delivery partner for the United Church of Canada's Faithful Footprints program. It's the only program of its kind in Canada. UCC has a commitment to reduce their GHG emissions 80% by 2050. In phase 1 and 2, we started with buildings, looking at energy efficiency, lowering carbon footprint, because that's the largest fixed cost for congregations. To date, I think we've had about 190 congregations participate. In phase 3, which we're just in the beginning of, we will be expanding the program to include things like advocacy for grid changes, faith sector impact, collaboration with other FBOs so that the sector can come together in advocacy work. As you well know, UCC has a strong climate justice contingent. I think I will end there. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you so much, Michelle. That was lovely. We are as always, rushing through these webinars, and it feels like we never have quite enough time for them. So I'm going to keep my remarks short and turn it over to Ariane, who is with the Centre Justice et Foi, to tell us a bit about some of her work. Ariane is speaking in French, so please enable your translation function if you can. Thanks, Ariane.
Bonjour, merci de m'accueillir parmi vous. J'aimerais, je laisse un petit moment pour que les gens puissent mettre en marche la traduction simultanée. Je voudrais aussi commencer par reconnaître que de Montréal, ici, je vous parle, je me trouve en territoire non cédé sur lequel plusieurs nations ont vécu, et notamment la nation Mohawk dans la ville de Tiohtià:ke. Je suis contente d'être parmi vous et je découvre beaucoup de choses parmi le travail des partenaires du réseau pour la justice climatique. Pour ma part, je suis membre de l'équipe du Centre Justice et Foi, qui est à Montréal un centre d'analyse sociale qui a été créé par des jésuites en 1983 comme un lieu pour poser un regard critique sur les structures sociales, politiques, économiques, culturelles, religieuses au Québec. Donc, il s'agit vraiment de faire de l'analyse sociale, mais à partir ou avec une inspiration qui vient de l'Évangile et de la spiritualité jésuite, que, comme peut-être certains d'entre vous savent, est très marquée par la notion de discernement. Le Centre Justice et Foi a deux secteurs principaux. Le premier, qui est le plus ancien, c'est la revue Relations. Alors, derrière moi, vous avez un des derniers numéros de la revue Relations, dont je parlerai un peu. C'est une allusion aux relations des jésuites, qui étaient des lettres envoyées en France par les premiers jésuites qui se sont établis dans la région. La revue Relations, c'est une revue d'analyse qui met ensemble des points de vue. On travaille beaucoup avec les milieux universitaires, avec la société civile, avec les milieux militants, avec des groupes communautaires et également avec des artistes. On a beaucoup cette idée que la beauté fait partie de comment aborder les questions de justice sociale. Donc, la revue Relations, qui en fait a été créée en 1941, elle a 6 parutions par année. Et je vais vous montrer tout à l'heure certains des derniers numéros qu'on a sortis. Je veux quand même mentionner, même si c'est moins directement sur notre sujet, mais les enjeux sociaux et écologiques sont interreliés. Au Centre Justice et Foi, on a aussi un deuxième secteur important qui s'appelle le secteur Vivre ensemble, qui a été créé en 1985 pour poser particulièrement un regard sur les questions de communauté culturelle et de diversité culturelle et religieuse au Québec, auxquels s'est ajouté des choses comme les enjeux de migration et de dialogue interreligieux, interculturel. On a par exemple au sein du secteur Vivre ensemble, mais en lien avec toutes sortes d'engagements et de projets de conférences, de projets de communication sur des enjeux anticolonialistes. Il y a aussi un groupe interreligieux, un groupe féministe interreligieux qui a été créé il y a maintenant une dizaine d'années. Donc, voilà, donc deux secteurs. La revue Relations, le secteur Vivre ensemble, plutôt sur le pluralisme. Et moi, je m'occupe d'un tout petit projet au Centre Justice et Foi. Le centre est aussi ouvert à d'autres partenariats, à d'autres projets, à d'autres manières de travailler pour la justice sociale au Québec. Et il y a quelques années, il a senti le besoin, en fait, il s'est fait appeler à intervenir sur la question du réseau des militants chrétiens ou des chrétiens qui sont animés par une vie spirituelle qui soutient leur désir de justice sociale. Et de comment, au Québec, dans notre contexte social particulier, les lieux de rencontre pour les personnes qui veulent parler ensemble de vie spirituelle et de justice sociale étaient en train pour certains de se dissocier ou de devenir de plus en plus rares. Donc, je m'occupe d'un projet de réflexion sur l'avenir du christianisme social. Comment est-ce qu'on peut nourrir au Québec un réseau qui est déjà existant de personnes qui, à partir de leur vie spirituelle et au moins de références chrétiennes, parce qu'il y a plein de manières différentes d'être en lien ou de vivre un lien d'attachement avec la tradition chrétienne, pour les gens qui font un lien entre ça et leur engagement pour la justice. Alors, j'aimerais vous parler un petit peu des différentes actions que le Centre Justice et Foi fait dans son engagement pour la justice, puis pour la justice climatique. Et ça va m'amener à parler aussi de d'autres choses qui se passent au Québec. Est-ce que je peux en trop vite? Ça va?
Thank you so much.
Merci.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ariane. Well done to fit that in quickly. In our remaining 10 minutes or so here, I'm going to turn it over to Ben. So Ben is joining us from the Ecology Action Centre in Atlantic, Canada, where he's been working as the regional anchor for that Faithful Footprints project that Reverend Michelle spoke of a few minutes ago. So Ben, why don't you dig into that?
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Tika. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, you might be a little bit quiet, but I think you're okay.
I'm going to do this just in case.
Okay.
It tends to help with the sound. Sometimes it doesn't, but we'll see. First, I would like to start by acknowledging the fact that I am joining this webinar from Chibuktuk, the unceded Mi'kmaq territory of the Mi'kmaq, and I would like to say that most of us are visitors here on this territory. I ask that we all consider this and the land on which we walk as we continue with today's discussion. So I just wanted to bring into scope a bit of examples and things like that. And I really like the different aspects that have been covered thus far in this webinar. It's been quite nice to see. And, you know, I really like For the Love of Their Creation, where there's the personal aspect, as well as thinking more broadly. So making personal actions, as well as thinking of more of a broader context of how you can get involved in addressing climate change on a broader level. With Faithful Footprints, what you can do for a number of things, you can actually make changes within your faith-based institution. And so what I'll share with you are a few stories and just quick anecdotes, I would say. I'll start with this. So a little more information about the grant. The grant covers things such as LEDs, replacement of appliances, energy audits, so on and so forth. The main reason being that you want to understand how you can reduce your greenhouse gas emissions within your faith-based community. And there are a number of ways you can do that. You can do an energy audit. You can do a green audit, which is also offered through Faith in the Common Good. And you can also ask different professionals, people about what you can do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. You can also focus on having a better resilience within your community, such as Michelle talked about with those projects about weathering future storms and the increasing storms that are happening due to climate change. You might have seen some stories about Texas and the deep impact that climate change is happening right now on Texas. So thinking about how communities in Canada and around the world can better be more resilient is something that a faith community can be thinking about and should be thinking about moving forward. I'd like to take you to one that wasn't actually part of the Faithful Footprints program, but I do like this story, and it's the story of the Ummah Masjid, or the Ummah Mosque in downtown Halifax. They wanted to create a community that was able to promote certain values of the Islam community and provide the support needed for their community members to continue doing practicing their faith and enjoying the things that they want to do. And so they created a building that serves as a community center, a place of exercise and really resource for community gatherings and things like that. So essentially, this building actually has a gym, a full-blown school gym underneath their worshiping area on the second floor. So they actually put the worshiping area on the second floor of the building rather than the first floor. They also designed the building to be geothermal. So this is one of the first examples of Nova Scotia of a geothermal building in a downtown community in Halifax. And all these aspects, they really tried to transform their community into this thriving community that would, address the upcoming issues that might be impacting the community down the road from climate change. So another example that I'd like to draw your attention to is Woodlawn United Church. Now, Woodlawn United Church is, and I can do a new share, perfect, a United Church in Dartmouth, Nova Scotia, so still part of the Halifax area or the Halifax Regional Municipality. And essentially, think of it as a church with an older church, and then they added on an addition onto their existing church. The reason they did that is that their old church building is actually being used as a full-time center for the food bank, and actually they're hosting different community events out of their old church. Their newer church, they needed more space to make it accessible, because the building wasn't very accessible before. You can actually see in the picture where there are stairs leading up to an entrance here. There's also stairs leading up to the main entrance. Instead, they created a whole paved ramp area, as well as put in an elevator, just so their community members could actually access the building. And they also installed solar panels on the roof of their building, as well as increased the energy efficiency of their building as well. Which created this whole new space, all these new spaces that they could use for community events. They could even host different faith communities within their church. And they're doing that all in a way to reduce greenhouse gas emissions within their community. Another example, and this will be the last one, that I'd like to draw you to is just that, and it's a major point that I keep in impacting or keep trying to impact and change. Faith communities have all these sorts of weird shapes to their buildings, and that can be a problem. It can also be a part of some really interesting and neat ideas. And when you get a really great idea, you can change the way the community thinks about the issues that are facing it. So, for example, right now there's this church in Halifax that is combining, and they essentially have to close down two of their congregations and merge them into one building. Now, to me, that it might seem a little bit difficult, and it is definitely difficult for that community because their congregation is shrinking. But it presents some really great opportunities. In the past, churches like that have actually made one of the buildings and used it for affordable housing. In the past, churches have used that extra space to create community halls and things like that, and emerge and engage with their surrounding community a bit more, even if it's not part of their faith community. For this church community that I've been talking to in the last few weeks, they're actually working on a neat geothermal and solar panel sort of way to make sure that their building is more sustainable moving forward and will be more resilient when it comes to storms, and have this solar that will reduce their whole greenhouse gas emission impact on the energy grid itself. So there's really, whenever someone comes across a specific issue and they don't know how to solve it, I really try to get in touch with them, because those problems are always, I think, opportunities for solutions moving forward. And I think that's a good way to think of it moving forward as well, especially with all this work that's being done by these organizations that you've highlighted today. It's a really great way to think about problems as an opportunity for the future. And I'll end there.
Thanks, Ben. I have to apologize. I think I cut Ariane off a little too quickly when she was speaking, and she had one more thing she wanted to share about an event that's coming up. So I'll pass it back to Ariane for a minute, and then we'll wrap up.
Merci beaucoup, Teika. Désolée pour la confusion. Il y avait quelques choses que je voulais encore partager, mais je pense que celle que dont j'aimerais le plus vous parler avant qu'on se quitte, c'est notre dernier numéro. Est-ce que ça fonctionne? Tout le monde voit le numéro? Pardon, comme ça. Donc, notre dernier numéro, comment être juste en sauvant la planète. Alors, c'est tout un numéro qui est vraiment passionnant, qui touche à toutes sortes de choses, qui touche l'agriculture, qui touche qu'est-ce que c'est la transition juste, qui parle du lien avec le capitalisme, d'un regard par une personne d'une communauté autochtone, qui parle de fiscalité, qui parle même de spiritualité. Donc, vraiment un petit bijou. C'est tout récent, c'est mars-avril 2020. On a aussi d'autres numéros comme la spiritualité pour changer le monde, qui aborde aussi la question écologique, et plus récemment, à la défense de l'Amazonie et de ses peuples, qui parle aussi beaucoup de l'impact et des questions de justice et de politique à travers les enjeux écologiques. Et peut-être une toute dernière chose, le 20 mars prochain, nous aurons un webinaire sur Oscar Romero, qui est une figure importante du monde catholique pour s'être confronté au pouvoir politique de son pays. Alors, on a fait le webinaire sur Oscar Romero et le courage devant le pouvoir dans un temps de crise écologique. On va aborder la non-violence et la résistance civile des peuples en ce moment, particulièrement dans les Amériques, dans un contexte de crise écologique. Donc, le 20 mars, c'est un webinaire auquel tout le monde est invité. Merci.
Thank you. That brings us to the top of the hour. And with that, we wrap up this installment of our Pathways to Zero webinar series. Please join us again next week. We will be back same time, same place. And if you haven't registered for next week's seminar yet, you can do so at climateactionnetwork.ca/pathways to zero. Next week, we will be diving back into place-based actions, looking at some local community activism. So see you next week. Thanks, everyone.